obviously the dream is dead.
With a team like Mongraal and Savage, they need more practice.
I felt like it was a for sure guarantee to qual Grands this season.
It's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. It's hard. I think I'll start off with the biggest one that people have been highlighting, Mongraal and Savage. Obviously, the dream is dead. The scripts did not come through. Those guys did not get out of lowers at all. We didn't even see them in uppers. And it was a sad day for the Mongraal fans, eh?
It was. I mean, I think this is part of the storyline. You know, they had the highs of last season making Grands, don't make it out of lowers, into LAN next season. It's just, this is actually part of the script perfectly. But talking like analytically, like it was a weird situation because I felt like their landing spot and the way they were playing at the start of the season was way better than last season. It's like they carried on for last season and were playing even better than before. They were able to get forecasts a lot of the time, and they were doing decent off spawn. They became one of the better teams at their landing spot. Obviously, loads of teams started to go there, and I felt like it was a for sure guarantee to qual Grands this season. But whatever happened, and like if you watch their games, it's just so many random things that happen, like randomly dying before endgame and having to solo clutch, or dying off spawn a bunch, or their endgame's not being clean. It just felt like there were so many different mistakes that happened throughout the weekend that it's hard to pin it down to one thing, apart from they just didn't play well enough. They just didn't have that one day where it all came together. They got the off spawn, they got the forecast, and they could play through it. It just felt like every single game, something random was going wrong.
It's been something that's been consistent across, I think, the start of the season. Is like, when they had a goal in mind, right? When they first came into it, okay, we're gonna, I'd say like the first short-term goal before they qualified Grands, okay, we're gonna make heats, okay? Mongo's come back after 2-3 years, he's gonna make heats, amazing. Okay, we made heats, sick. And now everything other than that is extra. Oh shit, all of a sudden we qualified Grands, what a crazy time. And then now, once you've already achieved that goal for them, I think it's harder for them to sort of focus up a little bit more and have that end place where they want to be. You know, the motivation for me, from them at least, seemed a lot more lacking compared to before. We saw them, at least from my side, we saw them practice a lot earlier the first time they ended up playing, because, you know, they had that big goal in mind. But this season, you know, I think they went on holiday at the start of the season, and then the week before FNtasia started, now it's okay, now we need to start grinding. And then they played every single day of scrims the day before FNTS. And then the same thing, you know, we had 3 weeks of breaks before semifinals. They took 2 weeks off pretty much. And then the week before FNTS semifinals, they again resumed their grind again for the last 5 days to try to focus up. So I think it's a lack of motivation this season, not as much a lack of skill, because they have been better. Yeah.
I think what's interesting is also, like, a lot of the top teams do exactly what you're talking about, where they take a period off, they practice more and more as the lead up to FNCS comes, and in particular in the lead up in that final week before Grands, like, you know, over a course of this week, you'll see some of the top teams practice more than ever. But with a team like Mongraal and Savage, they need more practice than that amount of allotted time, in particular the weeks between like semis and things like that. So I feel like, quite frankly, you know, they just have to put in more time in the next season. And of course, there's not that much time coming, as you tweeted the other day, what, like 32 days, 30 days, something like that, until the next FNCS starts. So hopefully they take a bit of time at the start of the season, as most people should, to rest up, get your mental back in check, and then get straight back into actually practicing for the course of the entire season. And, you know, it would be awesome to see them qualify to globals. But I mean, you know, based on this season, I said it basically, I think one of our first podcasts when we were doing the good, bad, the ugly, is that their drop spot is just ugly. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of it whatsoever.
Well, the meta changed with the landing spot, right? It started off as just, you know, they played the landing spot as on every other region, and then you go down to the dock, you get a little bit extra loot, and then you go play from there. But the way the meta's evolved from the landing spot is you now go for forecast. So not only are you having to make it a spawn consistently enough, you're now also in that area, you are the team who can get that forecast, the 80% spawn rate forecast, the most out of any other team. So you're now running into a situation where not only are you having to fight off spawn, not only is it now more contested because everyone knows you've shown the blueprint. They showed the blueprint throughout the whole of the weeks. That was, in my opinion, that's their biggest problem. I think they were the first team who started to play for forecast the most, who started doing that path they do every single game, using the drones and then just getting the extra mats on the way up, and then being the first team up to the hill. They showed that throughout the weeks. And then all you have is every other team going, oh, we can get forecast for free landing this spot. We can play for it. And I think it just, as you said, it became way more contested. They have to fight forecast. And I can remember back to obviously console and things like that, and eval cups where they weren't setting up forecast correctly. They were dying on forecast quite often. And I don't know. Maybe that might have been a problem for them because I don't think as many teams were actually that forecast was more like slappy and pleasant, and then the split to the left were kind of fighting for it.
A lot of teams want it, yeah.
Yeah, and then it just kind of became the Mongraal spot. Everyone started going for it. Tinu Chat, Pablo, they all started going for the forecast, so everyone knew, oh, we can play for it, and it became more contested.
The thing is, go ahead.
I was also just about to say, and realistically, out of the majority of the pro teams you have there, Savage and Mongraal are not going to be the best fighters. So when you're giving them a 50-50 drop spot, that's like the easiest fight they'll get. Then you go for a forecast fight on top of that. That's when those fights get sticky, they get ugly, and you get scuffed. And then even if they win that with forecast and have to get back into the game after that, it's like, okay, a lot of teams can rely on the ability to get a refresh at some point. And I'm not saying they're incapable of fighting mid-game by any means, but in terms of like a grand finals lobby, they are far from the strongest team there. So they're almost setting themselves up on a game plan that's not fit for their current level, in my opinion, you know?
Yeah, it's like I said, like you said, it's the spot now has evolved. It has a lack of diversity, right? You used to be able to run north, you used to be able to run south. Now north is claimed by teams because Oxy's ruined the spot now, so he's basically the reason why they didn't qualify. And to the south, you know, the Ninja Turtles are gone, so you don't have the loot underneath the tunnel anymore. And like we said, they're not great fighters, right? We can look at the comparison between them and Chapantini, for example, in that spot, who are getting 700 points in semifinals all of a sudden, you know, which is absolutely ridiculous. But they're a team that are able to get refreshes when they want to. Mongraal and Savage are a lot more passive, and when things, you know, punch them in the face, then they end up playing more passive, running into Storm, and then that basically just ruins their entire game.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I think the big problem with those two right now is that I just don't know where this goes outside of, like, of course, yeah, there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, well, they enjoy playing with each other, and Savage made sure to emphasize that, right? Which is great, because if they enjoy playing together, yeah, play together. That's perfectly fine. Why the fuck does anyone else matter in that case? Cool. Yeah. But if we're looking at it from like a competitive standpoint, I don't know how this situation gets much better. Just from the same problems that we've highlighted before, in that, cool, if they decide to move, wherever they go, they're going to be cont. Unless they decide to land at like some like crap spot, like, I don't know what, like the crappiest spot, like they're just going to be cont wherever they go. And again, whenever they're contested, they're always going to have these problems. I didn't watch much of lowers just because, you know, we're watching the broadcast, you're only watching uppers. But the couple games I did watch of lowers through Chapantini's POV, just because of how they dominated, it was like they'd land contested and they'd be there. And again, they're just better off spawn than these guys, right? It's like Savage historically has just never been that great off spawn. You know, he will admit to that, right? It's why he's always been contested, because people know we can contest him and find success. Mongraal, again, it's like, with Mongraal, you're talking about a player that, again, is just coming back from a long break, who's behind, he's just behind, right? And I think one of the worst things for Mongraal that's difficult for him in terms of like evolving as a player is that he had so much success being who he was that, like, it's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. It's hard. Do you know what I mean? Like the reality is, I think you'd almost be better off if like you took a player who didn't do much like back in the day and then brought them back when Mongraal came back, and then tried to, because there'd be so much more to learn, so much more to do. Whereas Mongraal, it's like, you know, when you see, especially with like fighting fundamentals, is where I notice it the most, where like back in the day, Mongraal could just jump on people's walls and just fuck them up. Like, he ain't got to worry about making space, doesn't have to worry about taking the most optimal angles all the time, right? And so you see that now where it's like, that's hard training to him. Like, you know, they go into some of these fights for bunkers and forecasts, and that is just the default for it. And it's hard to rejig that, retrain that. And again, the question becomes, can you rejig that and retrain that? Yes, you can. Can you do that before, in time for major free and grand finals? And probably not, right? So I worry that we're just going to be here we're going to be in the same sort of situation this time next season, or we're having a similar conversation. And even if they're able to make it to grands, which I think, as much as they didn't make it this season, I would say like I am more confident now that they are just a team that can make it to grands, more so than I did at the start of the season, right? Like after last season, I was worried it was a bit of a fluke and, you know, whatever, like forget it. this season, again, like Harry was saying, like they impressed me a lot early on the season. Like I thought, okay, actually maybe these guys could make it to Gans. But even
how long though? Like how long are they gonna wait for it to like how long would you give Mongo the time to practice, become play Fortnite professionally full time before you're like, okay, he just doesn't have it anymore?
I think to me, it's when Savage decides. And if Savage is enjoying it and Savage wants Mongraal to play, they will just continue playing. You see how many viewers Savage is getting. You see how much money he's probably making from it. It's like, why wouldn't he? Yes, he could play with someone else, but there is the risk that he could go play with someone else. And Savage could probably get majority, 99.999% of players he could go and find and play with, because it's Savage at the end of the day, right? He's still, if he's got a good duo, he can top 10 of Grands easily. Like he is still that type of player. But if it's Savage and he's enjoying the game, he's bringing in the viewers and he wants to play with Mongraal, why would he risk playing with someone else to still not make Grands? He'd rather play with Mongraal, enjoy it more, have the viewership, and then have still the chance to make Grands. And they probably think after this, they could still make Grands, right? I just quickly looked at both their lower brackets. In both rounds, 6 out of the 10 games were affected by off spawn, either dead off spawn, dead at forecast, or like 15 minutes into the game. That's 4 end games in each one. It's like they basically didn't even play this weekend. If you're not even getting half of your games to end game, then a change of landing spot or just a change of how they're playing, maybe not going for forecast as much, playing the landing spot and then going elsewhere, could help them a bunch. As you said, landing somewhere safer or landing a POI where they just win the off spawn, they get the loot and they play the game instead of, fighting bunker, fighting forecast, having to recover the game so much. I still think they have huge potential. I watched them play and a lot of their height games are really good. Mongraal is getting better as an IGL and as actually learning the game. I think the biggest issue with Mongraal, as you said, is his fighting. Another thing I was looking at was his soda cash cups, right? It's not the biggest thing, but I remember whenever I watch him, I feel like he just struggles so much fighting the average EU player now. It's like he's getting, and I know it doesn't matter, 7,000, 6,000 a soda cash cup and not getting the first game, second game, or even third game being the high kill win. It's like an hour into the tournament. So as you said, I think the biggest thing is if Mongraal individually can improve, I think the way they're playing, if they get a better landing spot, is more than good enough to make grand finals.
Also, I saw there was one game in lore I watched from them where they're third partying a fight and Savage jumps in and dies and Mongraal's distance himself. So he goes in to fight the 1v1. And you said, it's not that important how he's doing in solo cash cups, but this ended up essentially being a solo cash cup fight. And it was it was rough, it was very, very rough. He had tons of space. He ended up some of the edits looked like mine. And, that's not a compliment to myself.
That was the peanut butter peak, wasn't it? I think you were watching it on my stream. It was Visa would have been pissed when he saw this peak. I know. Bad.
Yeah, and some of it's good, but it's just it looks a little clunky, it looks a little lost still. So definitely agree. If he ends up increasing that individually, then their duo chemistry fighting as a skill just starts to skyrocket. But then you put up a good question of how long does it last? And the thing is, my concern is more how long does the grind last? Obviously, we saw this season, as soon as FNCS isn't close, it's kind of over. So you've got 30 days until next FNCS, and then Global Championships will be the season after. Don't know what, obviously, tournaments will have online. And I'm guessing we're going to have the OG season. Maybe there's some sort of FNCS in there. We don't know. But, there's so many gaps in between that. There are times for improvement for most players. But if we can already see that their motivation dips in those times, how much do they improve as the year goes on total? Because there's a lot of opportunities, but that's kind of where my main concern lies.
Yeah,
big flies back.
Yeah, it's they act as a team in terms of the progression of how much you grind and effort you put in. They act like a team that's already at the top.
Yeah.
Which they need to be working harder to catch up. Which is, it doesn't bode well for them.
Yo, if you enjoyed that video, make sure to click the link in the top right here. You can check out the full podcast where we waffle a little bit more about competitive Fortnite. And if you do enjoy it, make sure to subscribe as well.